"You don't belong here." That's what he said. He thought his platinum status and his Italian suit gave him the right to decide who sits in first class. He looked at a black woman quietly reading a financial report and saw a trespasser. He saw a mistake. He didn't know that the plane he was sitting on, the crew serving his champagne, and the very airline he was bragging about belonged to her. He was about to play a power game with the woman who wrote the rulebook. And when the landing gear touches down, let's just say, karma doesn't just bite, it bankrupts. This is the story of Preston Galloway's final flight. The air inside the Meridian Airlines VIP lounge at JFK Terminal 4 smelled of espresso, expensive leather, and that specific, sterile chill that only exists in places designed to separate the rich from the merely comfortable. Preston Galloway adjusted the cuff of his bespoke Brioni jacket, checking his reflection in the darkened glass of the lounge window. He was 55, silver-haired, and possessed the kind of jawline that had survived 3 divorces and 2 SEC investigations. He was the CEO of Galloway & Sons, a logistics firm that had recently secured a precarious but potentially billion-dollar contract with the government. He was flying to London to sign the final papers. He felt invincible. "Another mimosa, Mr. Galloway?" He didn't look at the server. He just tapped the rim of his empty glass. "Less juice, more champagne this time. And check on the flight status. I don't wait in lines." "Of course, sir." Preston pulled out his phone, scrolling through emails. He was in a foul mood despite the luxury. His assistant had booked him into seat 1A, the prime spot. But there had been a glitch in the system earlier that morning. He hated glitches. He hated anything that suggested the world wasn't a perfectly oiled machine designed for his convenience. Across the lounge, sitting in a high-backed wing chair near the window, was a woman. She was black, perhaps in her late 40s, wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater and dark, wide-legged trousers that looked comfortable but undeniably expensive. She had no luggage near her, save for a sleek, unmarked black leather tote bag resting by her ankles. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. She was sipping sparkling water and reading a physical newspaper, the Financial Times, with a pair of gold-rimmed reading glasses perched on her nose. Preston frowned. He knew the regulars. He knew the celebrities. He knew the money. He didn't know her. She was too quiet, too still. Most people in the Diamond Tier Lounge were on calls, barking orders, or visibly posturing. She was just existing. It annoyed him. It felt like she was hiding something, or perhaps she had snuck in. He watched as a lounge attendant approached her. Preston leaned in, expecting the staff to ask for her ticket or credentials. He wanted the satisfaction of seeing an interloper removed. It would improve his morning. Instead, the attendant, a stiff-lipped man named Charles, who had never once smiled at Preston in 10 years, bowed slightly. "Miss Street Claire," Charles said, his voice barely audible. "We have prepared the pre-boarding vehicle for you. To avoid the bridge." The woman, Miss Street Claire, didn't look up immediately. She turned the page of her newspaper, the crisp sound cutting through the low hum of the lounge. Then, she removed her glasses. "Thank you, Charles. Is the manifest finalized?" "It is, ma'am. We are ready when you are." "Good. I'll take the car." Preston scoffed audibly. The car? Meridian Airlines offered tarmac transfers for top-tier VIPs, but Preston, a Diamond member for 12 years, had been told that service was currently suspended due to staffing shortages. Yet here was this woman, getting the tarmac transfer. He stood up, grabbing his briefcase, and marched over to the concierge desk as the woman gathered her things and left through a side door. "Hey," Preston snapped, slamming his hand on the marble counter. "Charles." Charles turned, his face returning to its usual mask of polite indifference. "Mr. Galloway, how can I assist?" "I asked for a tarmac transfer 40 minutes ago. You told me it was unavailable." Preston pointed a manicured finger at the side door. "Who is she? Why does she get a car and I have to walk through the bridge like cattle?" Charles paused. A flicker of something unreadable passed behind his eyes. "That was a specific request from corporate, Mr. Galloway. A courtesy for unique circumstances." "Unique circumstances?" Preston laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "I spent $400,000 with this airline last year. I am the unique circumstance. Who is she? Some rapper's wife? A diversity hire on a corporate retreat?" The air in the lounge seemed to drop a few degrees. Charles stiffened. I am not at liberty to discuss other passengers' itineraries, sir. Your flight, Flight 882 to Heathrow, is now boarding first class. I suggest you head to the gate. Preston glared at him. This isn't over, Charles. I'm writing a report on you. And her. He snatched his boarding pass and stormed out. He was already composing the email in his head to the customer service VP, a man he had met once at a golf charity event. He would demand miles. He would demand an apology. But mostly, he wanted to know who that woman was, and he wanted to make sure she knew that he was the one who actually ran the world. He didn't know it yet, but he was walking into a trap of his own making. The Boeing 777-300ER was a beast of a machine. Inside, the first-class cabin was a sanctuary of soft lighting and gold accents. There were only 8 suites, arranged in a 1-2-1 configuration. They weren't just seats, they were enclosed pods with sliding doors, lie-flat beds, and 24-inch screens. Preston boarded with the swagger of a man entering his own living room. He breezed past the flight attendants at the door, barely acknowledging their greetings, and turned left toward the nose of the plane. He stopped dead. There, in seat 1A, his seat. The seat he always requested, the seat that faced the bulkhead with the extra 2 inches of legroom, was the woman from the lounge. Vivienne Streetclair was already settled. Her shoes were off, replaced by the airline's slippers. A glass of vintage Krug champagne was already on her side table. She was typing on a tablet, looking completely at home. Preston checked his boarding pass. It read 1A. He felt the blood rush to his face. This was it. The airline had double booked, or the system had glitched, and they had given his seat to the unique circumstance. He stepped into the aisle, looming over her pod. "Excuse me," Preston said, his voice loud enough to carry through the quiet cabin. Vivienne didn't jump. She finished typing a sentence, tapped the screen, and then slowly swiveled her head to look up at him. Her eyes were dark, calm, and unsettlingly direct. "Yes?" she asked. "You're in my seat." Preston held up his boarding pass, shoving it toward her face. 1A. Preston Galloway. "I booked this 3 weeks ago." Vivienne glanced at the ticket, then back at his face. She didn't check her own boarding pass. She didn't look flustered. "I believe there is a misunderstanding, Mr. Galloway," she said, her voice smooth, like polished wood. "But I am quite settled. Perhaps you should check with the purser." "I don't need to check with the purser," Preston snapped. "I know my seat. You're in it. Now, I don't know who you slept with or who you know to get the car transfer, but you aren't taking my spot. Move." The cabin went silent. 2 other passengers, a tech billionaire in 2A and a famous actress in 1K, stopped what they were doing to watch. Vivienne's expression didn't change, but her eyes narrowed slightly. "Sir, I would advise you to lower your voice. You are disturbing the cabin." "I'll lower my voice when you get out of my seat." A flight attendant, a young woman named Sarah, rushed over, looking terrified. "Mr. Galloway, is there a problem?" "Yes, there's a problem, Sarah," Preston sneered, reading her name tag. "This passenger is in 1A. My ticket says 1A. Get her out." Sarah looked at Preston's ticket, then at Vivienne. She went pale. She leaned in close to Preston, whispering, "Mr. Galloway, please." There was a last-minute equipment swap and a manifest update. "The system, it might have assigned you 1A. But what? But Miss Streetclair she is priority. We have moved you to 2F. It is the same suite, just on the aisle." Preston's face turned a shade of violet. 2F? I don't sit in the middle. I sit by the window. I want 1A. He turned back to Vivienne. "Listen, lady. I have a meeting in London that is worth more than this entire plane. I need to sleep. I need this spot. I don't know what affirmative action program got you this upgrade, but you're punching above your weight. Take the 2F seat and let the people who actually pay full fare sit where they belong." The insult hung in the air like toxic smoke. Vivienne Streetclair placed her tablet down on the side table. She uncrossed her legs and stood up. She wasn't tall, but she had a posture that made her seem 6 feet. "Mr. Galloway," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "You assume I am an upgrade?" "I assume you're in my way," Preston spat. "And you assume that because I am a black woman sitting in the most expensive seat on the plane, I must be a charity case? I'm calling it like I see it. You don't look like the typical one, a passenger." Vivienne smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator watching prey walk into a cage. "Sarah," Vivian said, not looking away from Preston. "Yes, ma'am?" Sarah's voice trembled. "Do not move Mr. Galloway to 2F. Preston smirked. "Finally, some sense." "Move him," Vivian continued, her eyes locking onto Preston's. "To economy." Preston laughed. He actually laughed out loud. "Economy? Who do you think you are? The Queen of England?" "No," Vivian said. "I'm just the woman who is going to ruin your day if you don't sit down and shut up. But since you've decided to make this about my race and my right to be here, I am removing my goodwill." She looked at Sarah. "Get the lead purser, and tell the captain I need a word." Preston crossed his arms. "Go ahead. Get the captain. I play golf with the CEO of Meridian, Jonathan Crane. I'll have you dragged off this plane." Vivian sat back down, picking up her champagne. She took a slow sip. "Jonathan Crane," she murmured. "Yes, I know John. He has a terrible slice." She looked up at Preston one last time. "You have 5 minutes to take seat 2F, Mr. Galloway, or you won't be flying at all." Preston leaned down, his face inches from hers. "I'm not moving, and you're going to regret opening your mouth." He sat on the ottoman of her suite, planting himself there, blocking her in. "I'll wait." The lead purser, a stern British woman named Eleanor, arrived at a brisk pace. She saw Preston sitting on Vivian's ottoman, and her eyes widened in horror. "Mr. Galloway, please stand up immediately," Eleanor commanded. "Not until she moves," Preston said, pulling out his phone. "I'm recording this. Reverse discrimination. I'm going to put this all over Twitter." Vivian sighed, a sound of profound boredom. She tapped her Apple Watch. "Eleanor?" Vivian said. "Yes, Miss St. Clair?" "Code red. Disruptive passenger. Threat level 2. Please initiate removal protocols." Preston scoffed. "Removal protocols? You think you can?" He stopped. The tone in the cabin had shifted. The flight attendants weren't looking at him with fear anymore. They were looking at him with pity. Eleanor picked up the interphone handset. She didn't dial the pilot. She dialed a 3-digit code that Preston had never heard before. "Cockpit, this is cabin. We have a situation alpha in 1A. Authorization code, VSC-01. Requesting immediate law enforcement at the gate." Preston froze. "Authorization code? VSC? Vivian Street, Claire." "You're bluffing," Preston stammered, though his confidence was fracturing. Vivian didn't answer. She just picked up her Financial Times again. "You have 3 minutes left, Mr. Galloway. I'd suggest you use them to call your lawyer. You're going to need one in London." And in New York? The tension in the first-class cabin was so thick it felt physical, like the change in cabin pressure during a steep descent. The other passengers had stopped pretending to be polite. The tech billionaire in 2A had taken off his noise-canceling headphones to watch, and the actress in 1K was openly filming the interaction on her iPhone, angling it to capture Preston's red, perspiring face. Preston Galloway remained seated on Vivian's ottoman, his arms crossed. A defiant smirk plastered on his face. He felt he had called their bluff. Airlines were terrified of bad PR. They wouldn't drag a platinum member off a plane for a simple seating dispute. He was Preston Galloway. He generated revenue. This woman, whoever she was just a momentary glitch in the matrix of his life. Then, the cockpit door opened. It wasn't the co-pilot, it was Captain Marcus Thorne. Thorne was a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite, 6'4", silver temples, and the kind of heavy, deliberate walk that came from 30 years of flying heavy metal for the Air Force before going commercial. He didn't rush. He walked past the galley, past Eleanor the purser, and stopped directly in front of Suite 1A. He looked down at Preston, who was still perched on the ottoman. "Is there a problem here?" Captain Thorne's voice was a low rumble, devoid of customer service sweetness. Preston stood up, buttoning his jacket, assuming this was his moment of vindication. Finally, someone in charge. "Yes, Captain, there is a problem. I'm Preston Galloway. I'm a Diamond Medallion member. I booked seat 1A. This woman is refusing to vacate my seat, and your flight crew is refusing to enforce the assigned seating." He gestured to Vivian, who hadn't looked up from her newspaper since the captain arrived. "I want her moved. Now. We're already burning fuel sitting at the gate." Captain Thorne didn't look at Vivian. He looked at Eleanor. "Manifest?" Eleanor handed him the digital tablet silently. Thorne scrolled. He looked at 1A. He looked at the name. He looked at the code next to the name. VSC01 owner. His eyes widened a microscopic fraction of an inch, but enough for Eleanor to notice. He swiped to the next tab. He saw Preston's name. Seat 2F. Thorne handed the tablet back to Eleanor and turned his full attention to Preston. Mr. Galloway, you are incorrect. The manifest lists you in 2F. Miss Street Claire is in her assigned seat. That's a computer error, Preston shouted, spit flying. I demand you override it. I don't override the owner of the aircraft, Mr. Galloway, Thorne said calmly. Preston blinked. The owner? What are you talking about? Meridian is a public company. Jonathan Crane is the CEO. Mr. Crane answers to the board, Thorne said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerous. And the board answers to the holding company. Now, you are disrupting my flight. You have delayed our pushback by 12 minutes. That is a $12,000 delay. Preston felt a cold prickle of uncertainty for the first time. I know Jonathan Crane. I'll be calling him. You can call the President of the United States for all I care, Captain Thorne said. But you will not be doing it from first class. Miss Street, Claire has exercised her prerogative under Section 14 of the Outcome Protocols. You are being downgraded. Downgraded? Preston gasped. To business? Viviane turned the page of her newspaper. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet cabin. No, she said softly, without looking up. Not business? Captain Thorne nodded. Mr. Galloway, your behavior harassment of another passenger, refusal to follow crew instructions, and breach of cabin peace has qualified you for immediate removal. Fine, take me off. Preston bluffed. I'll sue you for millions. I'll miss my meeting in London, and I will bill you for the lost contract. Thorne leaned in. However, Miss Street Claire has graciously petitioned that you remain on the flight, as she understands you have urgent business in London, but you will not be sitting here. We have one seat left on the aircraft, seat 42E. Preston's jaw dropped. 42E? That's the last row. That's the middle seat. It is, Thorne agreed. Near the lavatory. It is the only seat available. Your luggage has already been tagged for retrieval in London. You have 10 seconds to decide, Mr. Galloway. Take seat 42E, or get off my plane and talk to the Port Authority officers waiting at the top of the jet bridge. Preston looked at the door. He could see the flashing blue lights of a police cruiser reflecting off the terminal glass outside. If he got off, he would be arrested. He would miss the meeting with the UK Ministry of Defence. The Galloway & Sons contract, the one that was going to save his company from bankruptcy, would be dead. He had to be in London by 9 a.m. tomorrow. He looked at Viviane. She was sipping her champagne, looking at the bubbles rising in the glass. She was ignoring him so completely it felt like a physical blow. Preston choked on his own ego. I will take the seat. Good choice, Thorne said. Sarah, escort Mr. Galloway to the rear of the aircraft. Do not allow him to stop in business class. Preston grabbed his briefcase. His face was burning with a heat that felt like a sunburn. He looked at Viviane one last time. You haven't heard the last of this. You don't know who you're messing with. Viviane finally looked at him. She lowered her glasses. Her eyes were hard as diamonds. Enjoy the flight, Preston, she said. It was the use of his first name that chilled him. It sounded less like a farewell and more like a sentence. Sarah, the flight attendant he had berated earlier, gestured to the aisle. This way, sir. Preston Galloway, CEO, million-miler, and master of the universe, began the longest walk of his life. The walk to the back of a Boeing 777-300 is long. When you are being paraded through the cabin like a prisoner of war, it feels infinite. Preston walked past the business class mini cabins, where executives were already reclining in their pods, sipping whiskey and watching movies. He saw a competitor of his, Bob Vance from DHL, sitting in 12F. Bob looked up, saw Preston clutching his briefcase and being marched toward economy, and his eyebrows shot up. Preston quickly looked away, staring at the floor, his heart hammering against his ribs. He saw me, Preston thought, panic rising. Bob saw me. By the time we land, the whole industry will know. He passed through premium economy. Then, the curtain was pulled back, and he entered the main economy cabin. The air changed. It was warmer here, stuffier. The smell of humanity was immediate, a mix of stale coffee, body heat, and the faint, chemical scent of disinfectant. The overhead bins were all closed, the cabin was packed. Babies were crying. People were fighting for elbow room. "Keep moving, sir," Sarah said, her voice devoid of the warmth she had shown him in first class. They walked, and walked, past row 20, row 30, row 40. Finally, they reached the very back. Row 42 was the last row before the rear galley and the lavatories. The seats didn't recline fully because of the wall behind them. Seat 42E was the middle seat in the center block of 4. To his left was a young man with dreadlocks wearing a frantic amount of neon clothing, listening to trap music so loud Preston could hear the snare drums hissing from the headphones. To his right was a harried mother with a toddler on her lap and an infant in a bassinet attached to the bulkhead wall. The toddler was currently eating and crumbling a sticky granola bar. "Here you are, Mr. Galloway," Sarah said, pointing to the narrow strip of fabric that was to be his home for the next 7 hours. "Please stow your briefcase under the seat in front of you." "There's no room," Preston hissed, looking at the backpack of the neon-clad man encroaching on his footwell. "Make room," Sarah said simply. She turned on her heel and walked away, the curtain to business class swishing shut, sealing him in his misery. Preston squeezed into the seat. He was a broad-shouldered man, used to space. He had to hunch his shoulders to fit between the headphones and the baby. The seatbelt felt like a tourniquet. As the plane pushed back and taxied, Preston seethed. He closed his eyes, visualizing the destruction of Vivienne Street Claire. He would find out who she was. He would hire private investigators. He would ruin her reputation. He would buy whatever company she worked for and fire her publicly. The plane took off. The roar of the engines was deafening back here, far louder than the whisper-quiet nose of the plane. As soon as the fasten seatbelt sign chimed off, Preston reached for his credit card. He needed Wi-Fi, he needed information. He opened his laptop, balancing it precariously on his knees because the person in front of him had immediately reclined their seat, jamming the tray table into Preston's stomach. Meridian Wi-Fi portal, $29.99 for the flight. "Robbery," he muttered, punching in his corporate Amex. He connected. The signal was weak, but it was enough. He opened his secure corporate email and drafted a message to Jessica, his executive assistant in New York, and copied his chief legal officer. Subject: Urgent, flight incident. Do not ignore, Jessica. I need a full background check immediately on a woman named Vivienne Street Claire. Spelling might vary. She is currently on flight MA 882 in seat 1A. She claims to have some authority over the airline. She is a black female, approx 50 seconds. High-end clothing. Acts like she owns the place. I want to know who she is, who she works for, and what dirt we have. She humiliated me. I want her head on a platter by the time I land in London. Dig deep. Use the guys at Kroll if you have to. P. Galloway. He hit send. The progress bar crawled. Sent. He sat back, his knees aching. The toddler next to him spilled apple juice. A splash hit Preston's sleeve. He closed his eyes and breathed through his nose, trying to suppress a scream. Just wait, he thought. Just wait until I get the dossier. 30 minutes passed. The food cart came by. They had run out of the chicken option. He was handed a foil container of pasta with red sauce. It was lukewarm. He didn't eat it. His laptop pinged. Incoming email from Jessica, exec, asked. Preston opened it, his fingers trembling with anticipation. He expected to hear she was a mid-level manager, or maybe the wife of a sports star, someone he could crush with a few phone calls to his friends at the country club. The email was short. Mr. Galloway, please tell me you did not get into an altercation with Vivienne Street Claire. I am attaching the profile. You need to read this carefully. I tried to call you, but the line wouldn't connect. Vivienne Street Claire isn't just a board member. She is the founder and managing partner of Aurelius Capital. Preston stared at the screen. Aurelius Capital. The name sounded familiar, but he couldn't place it. He opened the attachment, a PDF dossier. The first page was a photo of Vivienne, looking regal on the cover of Forbes. The headline read, The Silent Architect. How Vivienne Street Claire built a trillion-dollar empire from the shadows. Preston felt his stomach drop. He began to read. Vivienne St. Clair, former Goldman Sachs partner, founded Aurelius Capital in 2008. Assets under management, $450 billion. Key holdings, 1. Meridian Airlines, majority shareholder, via Shellcore. 2. British Aerospace Systems Board Seat. 3. The Kensington Logistics Group. Preston stopped breathing. The Kensington Logistics Group. That was the company he was flying to London to meet. That was the government contractor handling the Ministry of Defence deal. Galloway and Sons was a subcontractor. They needed Kensington's approval to get the contract. If Vivian Street Clare owned a controlling interest in Kensington Logistics. He frantically scrolled down the document. Notes. Street Clare is known for being ruthlessly private and highly protective of her staff and companies. She personally vets all major supply chain partners for her logistics holdings. Oh my God, Preston whispered. The realization hit him like a falling safe. He wasn't just sitting in economy, he was flying toward his own execution. The meeting in London wasn't going to happen, she knew. That's why she was on the flight. She was probably going to the same meeting. He looked at the timestamp of the article. It was from last month. He had insulted, harassed, and tried to bully the woman who held the literal deed to his company's future. He frantically hit reply to Jessica. Jessica, call the legal team. Draft an apology letter. I need flowers waiting at Heathrow. I need... The Wi-Fi cut out. Connection lost. Preston stared at the spinning wheel of death. He tapped the refresh button. Nothing. He looked up at the Wi-Fi light on the ceiling. It was off. Excuse me, he yelled at a passing flight attendant, a male attendant this time. The Wi-Fi is down. The attendant stopped. He looked at Preston with a strange, knowing smile. Yes, sir. I believe the captain turned it off for the cabin to conserve power. We are expecting some turbulence. I need to send an email. It's an emergency. I'm sorry, sir. No Wi-Fi. You'll have to wait until London. Preston slumped back into his seat. The baby next to him started screaming, a high-pitched wail that drilled into his skull. The man with the dreadlocks was now eating a tuna sandwich that smelled like low tide. Preston Galloway, the man who never waited in lines, the man who commanded boardrooms, sat in the middle seat of the last row, trapped in a metal tube at 35,000 feet, knowing that 500 feet ahead of him, wrapped in cashmere and sipping Krug, sat the architect of his destruction. And there was absolutely nothing he could do but wait for the landing. The landing at Heathrow was rough, a crosswind touchdown that shook the frame of the aircraft and elicited a few nervous gasps from the passengers in the rear. For Preston Galloway, the jolt was nothing compared to the tremor in his hands. As the plane taxied to the gate, he was already unbuckling, defying the illuminated signs. He had a plan. It was a desperate, sweating, frantic plan, but it was all he had. He needed to get to the forward cabin. He needed to intercept Vivian Street Clare before she got into her private car. He would beg, he would grovel. He would offer to donate $1 million to her favorite charity. He would do whatever it took to stop her from making the call that would kill his company. The plane shuddered to a halt. The fasten seatbelt sign pinged off. Preston surged up from seat 42E, shoving the neon-clad man's heavy backpack aside. Move, he barked. Emergency. He scrambled into the aisle, briefcase in hand, ready to sprint. But he hit a wall of humanity. The aisle was instantly clogged. In economy, deplaning is a contact sport. People were wrestling oversized carry-ons from the bins, parents were organizing children, and the slow, shuffling procession had begun. "Let me through," Preston yelled, trying to squeeze past a woman struggling with a guitar case. "I have a connection. Please." "We all have places to be, mate," a burly man in a Manchester United jersey grunted, blocking Preston's path with a shoulder that felt like a brick wall. "Wait your turn." Preston stood on his tiptoes, peering down the long tube of the fuselage. He could see the business-class curtains far ahead. They were open. The front of the plane was already emptying. "She's leaving," he thought, panic clawing at his throat. "She's walking off right now." It took 22 agonizing minutes for Preston to reach the front door. 22 minutes of inhaling stale air, of being bumped and jostled, of watching the precious seconds of his career tick away. When he finally reached the L1 door, Sarah, the flight attendant, was standing there saying goodbye to passengers. She saw Preston. Her smile vanished instantly. "Have a pleasant stay in London, Mr. Galloway," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Where did she go?" Preston demanded, ignoring the pleasantry. Miss Street Claire, did she leave? Sarah tilted her head. Miss Street Claire? Oh, she was met by the Special Services team on the jet bridge about 20 minutes ago. She's likely at the Windsor suite by now. You won't find her. Preston didn't wait. He ran up the jet bridge. He ran through the glass corridors of Terminal 3. He sprinted toward immigration, his heart pounding a chaotic rhythm against his ribs. He cleared customs thanks to his global entry status. Bursting into the arrivals hall, he scanned the crowd of drivers holding iPads with names on them. He looked for Street Claire. He looked for Aurelius. Nothing. He ran outside to the curbside pickup. He saw a sleek black Range Rover pulling away, flanked by 2 police motorcycles. The rear window was tinted specifically to block prying eyes, but Preston knew. He stood on the curb, inhaling the diesel fumes of a London morning, his Brioni jacket wrinkled, his shirt clinging to his back with sweat. She was gone. He couldn't apologize. He checked his phone. No new emails, no cancellation of the meeting. Maybe, a tiny, delusional voice whispered in his head. Maybe she won't mix personal with business. She's a professional. A billionaire. She wouldn't tank a government contract just because I was rude, right? That's bad business. He clung to that hope. He had to. Taxi, he screamed, waving his arm frantically. Canary Wharf. Double fare if you get me there in 40 minutes. The headquarters of Kensington Logistics Group was a fortress of glass and steel rising from the grey waters of the Thames at Canary Wharf. It screamed old money and new power. Preston Galloway arrived at 9:45 a.m. for his 10 a.m. meeting. He had tried to freshen up in the restroom of the lobby, splashing cold water on his face and trying to steam the wrinkles out of his suit with the hand dryer. It hadn't worked. He looked like a man who had slept in a dryer. His eyes were bloodshot from the stress and lack of sleep. He was escorted to the 40th floor. The boardroom was massive, with a view of the entire London skyline. Sitting at the head of the table was Sir Arthur Penhaligon, the CEO of Kensington. He was a quintessential British executive, pinstripe suit, pocket square, and an expression of polite skepticism. Mr. Galloway, Sir Arthur said, not rising to shake hands. You look traveled. Rough flight, Sir Arthur. Preston managed a weak chuckle, taking a seat. Turbulence. But I'm here, and I'm ready to close this. Indeed. The Ministry of Defense is pressing us for the final subcontractor list by noon today. Sir Arthur tapped a folder on the table. Your proposal is strong, Preston. Financially, Galloway & Sons makes sense. Your logistics network in the States is solid. Preston felt a surge of relief so potent it almost made him dizzy. She didn't call. Vivienne hadn't called. She had let it go. She was just scaring him on the plane. Thank you, Arthur, Preston said, his old confidence leaking back into his voice. We are the best choice. I personally oversee all high-level operations. We run a tight ship. Discipline, order, and respect. That's the Galloway motto. Discipline and respect, Sir Arthur repeated slowly. Interesting you say that. It's how I built my company, Preston lied. Well, Sir Arthur said, closing the folder, I am prepared to recommend Galloway & Sons to the board. However, as you know, for contracts exceeding £50 million, we require sign-off from the chair of the Oversight Committee representing our majority shareholders. Preston froze. The Oversight Committee? Yes. They usually just rubber stamp these things, but the chairwoman happened to be in London today and asked to sit in on the final vetting. She's very hands-on. Sir Arthur pressed a button on the intercom. Send her in. The heavy oak doors at the back of the room opened. Preston didn't turn around. He couldn't. His neck muscles had locked. He stared at Sir Arthur, whose face remained perfectly neutral. The sound of heels clicking on the parquet floor grew louder. Click, click, click. A figure walked past Preston and took the seat directly opposite him at the other end of the long table. Vivienne Street Claire looked immaculate. She was wearing a different outfit, now a navy power suit that looked like it cost more than Preston's car. Her hair was perfect. She looked fresh, rested, and utterly in command. She placed a single file on the table. She didn't open it. Good morning, Sir Arthur, she said, her voice warm and professional. Vivienne. Arthur nodded. Thank you for joining us. I was just telling Mr. Galloway here that his proposal seems sound. Vivienne finally turned her eyes to Preston. There was no anger in them. There was something far worse. Amusement. "Hello, Preston," she said. Sir Arthur looked between them. "You two know each other?" "We met recently," Vivian said. "On the flight over." "Ah," Arthur smiled. "Excellent. So you've already established a rapport." "You could say that," Vivian said. She leaned back in her chair, steepling her fingers. "Preston, before we proceed, I have a question about your operational philosophy. You mentioned discipline and respect a moment ago." Preston's mouth was dry. He tried to speak, but it came out as a croak. He cleared his throat. "Yes, I did. At Kensington, and by extension at Aurelia's Capital," Vivian began, her voice crisp. "We believe that a company's leadership defines its culture. If the CEO is volatile, the company is unstable. If the CEO lacks judgment, the company carries risk." She tapped the file on the table. "I observed a CEO recently," she continued, speaking to Arthur now, but keeping her eyes on Preston. "He was faced with a minor logistical inconvenience, a seating error, a variable he hadn't predicted. In our business, variables happen every day, don't they, Arthur?" "Every hour," Arthur agreed. "Exactly. And how did this CEO react?" Vivian tilted her head. "Did he adapt? Did he seek a solution? Did he treat the staff with dignity?" Preston closed his eyes. "No," Vivian answered herself. "He threw a tantrum. He abused the staff. He tried to physically intimidate a fellow passenger. He invoked his status as a weapon. He showed a complete lack of emotional control, risk assessment, and basic humanity." The room was deadly silent. "Sir Arthur," Vivian said, "if a man cannot handle being asked to move seats on an airplane without calling the police, how can we trust him to handle a logistics crisis involving military hardware? If he screams at a flight attendant, how will he treat our liaison officers?" She pushed the file toward Arthur. "This is the incident report from Flight 882. It includes witness statements from the purser and the captain. It also notes that Mr. Galloway attempted to use his influence to have a passenger removed from the flight." Sir Arthur opened the file. He read the first page. His eyebrows went up. He read the second page. His face hardened. He looked up at Preston with a look of pure coldness. "Is this true, Mr. Galloway?" Arthur asked quietly. Preston scrambled. "Arthur, please. It was a misunderstanding. I was stressed. I didn't know who she was." "And that," Vivian cut in, her voice sharp as a whip, "is exactly the point, Preston. You didn't know who I was. If you had known I was the majority shareholder, you would have kissed my ring. But you thought I was just a black woman in a seat you wanted. You treated me based on what you thought I was worth. That is not a misunderstanding. That is a character flaw. And I do not do business with flawed characters." She stood up. "I am vetoing the Galloway contract, Arthur. Effective immediately. Find the runner-up. Give them the deal." "Understood," Arthur said, closing the file. Preston stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You can't do this. This contract. It's everything. My company. We've leveraged everything on this. If I walk out of here with nothing, Galloway and Sons is finished." Vivian stopped at the door. She turned back one last time. "Then I suggest you fly home, Preston," she said. "I believe there are seats available in economy." She walked out. Preston Galloway stood alone in the boardroom, watching his reflection in the glass, realizing that the view from the top was terrifying when you were falling. Preston Galloway did not take a private limousine back to Heathrow. There were no blacked-out SUVs waiting for him, no drivers holding placards with his name, and certainly no chilled water bottles waiting in a leather cup holder. Instead, he took the tube. He found himself squeezed into a corner seat on the Piccadilly line, his knees knocking against a tourist's massive backpack. The carriage rattled and screeched through the dark tunnels of London, the air thick with the smell of damp wool and weary commuters. Preston sat with his expensive suitcase wedged between his legs, clutching the handle so tightly his knuckles turned the color of bone. He stared blankly at an advertisement for a hair loss clinic, unable to process the words. He felt hollowed out, as if the meeting at Kensington had physically scooped the organs from his body, leaving only a shell in a wrinkled Brioni suit. His phone vibrated in his pocket. It didn't just buzz, it felt like it was seizing. It had been vibrating non-stop since he walked out of the elevator at Canary Wharf, a relentless, electronic heartbeat of disaster. He had been too terrified to look at it then. Now, with 40 minutes of tunnel ahead of him, the curiosity became a form of self-harm. He had to know. He pulled the device out. The screen lit up, a blinding window into his own destruction. There were notifications stacked so deep they blurred together. 17 missed calls from Jessica. 12 from his chief financial officer. 5 from his wife, Linda. And then the texts. Dozens of them. Friends, enemies, board members, reporters. Preston, tell me this isn't real. Call me. Now. The stock is free-falling. Is it true about the airline ban? WSJ is asking for a comment on the Street Claire altercation. Preston's breath hitched. The altercation. He opened Twitter. X. He didn't even have to search for his name. It was already there, glowing in the trending tab like a neon warning sign. Number Galloway meltdown was the number 3 trend in the United States. Number 5 in the United Kingdom. His thumb hovered over the hashtag trembling. He clicked it. The top post was a video with 14.2 million views. It had been posted by the actress in seat 1K. The caption was brutal in its simplicity. Point of view. You pay $15K for a first-class seat just to watch a CEO try to bully the owner of the airline. Money can't buy class, but it can buy you a lawsuit. Number Meridian Airlines, number Karma. Preston pressed play. The video was terrifyingly high definition. It captured every pore of his red, sweating face as he loomed over Vivienne Street Claire. The audio was crisp, cutting through the background hum of the jet engines. I don't know who you slept with to get this upgrade. The voice on the recording sounded shrill, pathetic. Was that really him? Did he really sound that entitled? The camera panned to Vivienne. She looked like a statue of calm, her silhouette framed by the airplane window, holding her champagne with an elegance that made Preston look like a frothing madman in comparison. Move him to economy, she said on the video. Then came the climax, Preston being marched down the aisle, clutching his briefcase, looking back with a sneer that the internet was now dissecting frame by frame. Preston scrolled down to the comments, feeling a wave of nausea roll over him. The court of public opinion was in session, and the verdict was unanimous. At Stockwatcher. Just watched $GWA stock tank 18% in pre-market. The algorithm picked up the racist rant sentiment before the news even broke, shorting this company into the ground. At Aviation Geek, I've flown 2 million miles and never seen a self-own this bad. Imagine trying to big-time Vivienne Street Claire. That's like trying to evict your own landlord. Rip this guy's career. At Corporate Cringe. The way he pointed his finger? Textbook narcissist. Meridian should ban him for life. At Newsbreaker. Ministry of Defense announces immediate review of all pending contracts with Galloway and Sons, citing grave ethical concerns regarding executive stability. Preston dropped the phone into his lap. He felt like he was going to be sick right there on the train floor. It wasn't just the contract. It wasn't just the money. It was his name. He wasn't Preston Galloway, the logistics mogul, anymore. He was the plain Karen. He was a meme. He was the face of entitlement, captured in 4K resolution for the world to laugh at forever. The train screeched into Heathrow Terminal 3. Preston stumbled out, his legs numb. He navigated the labyrinth of the underground station and emerged into the bright, artificial light of the departures hall. He walked fast, head down, trying to make himself small. But old habits die hard. As he approached the check-in zones, his body went on autopilot. He bypassed the snaking queues of the main cabin and walked straight toward the red carpet of the first-class check-in counters. He needed to get home. He needed to hide in his mansion in Connecticut and turn off the internet. He approached the desk. The agent, a woman named Vanessa with impeccable makeup and a Meridian Airlines scarf tied perfectly around her neck, looked up. She had been smiling at the previous passenger. When her eyes locked onto Preston, the smile vanished instantly, replaced by a look of cool, professional recognition. "Mr. Galloway," she said. It wasn't a question. "I need to change my flight," Preston said, his voice raspy and cracked. "I need the next flight to New York. 1A if available. I just want to go home." Vanessa didn't type. She didn't look for flights. She simply turned her monitor slightly so he could see the screen. "Mr. Galloway, I'm afraid I cannot book you into first class. Or business class." "Why not?" Preston snapped, a flash of his old, ugly anger flaring up despite his exhaustion. I have the miles. I have the status. I am a Diamond Medallion member. No, sir, she said, her voice icy. You had the status. On the screen, where his name usually glowed gold next to the words Diamond Medallion, there was now a gray banner that looked like a tombstone. Status. Suspended. Review pending. Flags. VSE block. Security risk. Your loyalty account has been frozen pending a legal investigation into a violation of our conditions of carriage regarding crew and passenger harassment, Vanessa explained, reciting the script with satisfying precision. Furthermore, you have been placed on the Meridian Airlines no-fly list for all premium cabins. Indefinitely. Preston gripped the edge of the counter, his knuckles white. You banned me from first class? Do you know how much money I spend with this airline? That is a corporate directive, sir. Sent from the chairman's office. She paused, letting the weight of that title sink in. We have been instructed that we can still transport you, as a humanitarian courtesy to get you home, but only in the main cabin. Preston looked around. The terminal was bustling. A group of teenagers near the luggage wrap station were looking at him. One of them nudged the other and pointed a phone in his direction. They recognized him from the video. Fine, Preston whispered, the fight draining out of him. Just get me on the plane. The next flight leaves in 2 hours. It is fully booked, but we have one middle seat remaining. Preston looked at her. He knew what was coming. It was the universe completing its joke. Let me guess, he said, closing his eyes. Row 42? Vanessa didn't smile, but her eyes twinkled with a hint of justice. Row 44, actually. The very last row, right against the rear galley wall and the lavatories. It's a non-reclining seat, the printer whirred. She handed him the boarding pass. It wasn't the heavy, gold-embossed cardstock he was used to. It was the flimsy, thermal paper used for economy tickets. Preston Galloway's seat. 44 E-Zone. 9. He took the ticket. It felt heavy in his hand, like a sentence. He turned away from the gold carpet. He walked past the frosted glass doors of the VIP lounge, where he had demanded champagne and insulted Vivienne Street Claire just 24 hours ago. He could almost smell the espresso and leather from inside, a paradise he was now exiled from. He walked toward the general security line. It was a sea of people, backpackers, families with crying infants, tired tourists. He joined the back of the queue, sandwiched between a man eating a pungent onion sandwich and a family arguing over passports. As he shuffled forward, inch by inch, removing his belt, taking off his expensive Italian shoes, and placing his laptop in a gray plastic bin, Preston looked up at the departure screens. Meridian Flight 001 to New York. Status. On time. Below the flight information, a 24-hour news channel was playing on a muted TV screen hanging from the ceiling. The ticker tape at the bottom caught his eye. Galloway & Sons stock plummets 40%. As CEO scandal goes viral, board calls emergency meeting to discuss leadership change. Preston Galloway closed his eyes, standing in his socks on the cold airport floor. He thought of Vivienne Street Claire. She was probably already in the air, or sitting in a private suite, sipping tea, moving on to her next billion-dollar deal. She hadn't screamed. She hadn't threatened him. She hadn't even stood up to fight him. She had simply let him destroy himself. He picked up his plastic bin and stepped through the metal detector. He was just a passenger now, one among millions. And it was going to be a very, very long flight home. And that is how Preston Galloway learned the most expensive lesson of his life. He thought power was about shouting the loudest, wearing the best suit, and sitting in the front row. He judged Vivienne Street Claire by the color of her skin and the quietness of her demeanor, assuming that because she wasn't demanding attention, she didn't command respect. But true power doesn't need to make a scene. True power is silent. It's the ability to sit calmly while someone screams at you, knowing that with a single phone call, you can turn their world upside down. Preston lost his contract, his reputation, and his company, not because of a computer glitch, but because of his own arrogance. In the end, the platinum status he worshipped was just plastic. Character is the only currency that matters, and Preston Galloway went bankrupt. Wow, talk about a turbulent landing. If that story didn't satisfy your justice cravings, I don't know what will. It just goes to show you never really know who you're sitting next to. So be kind, or you might end up in row 44. If you enjoyed this story of high-flying karma, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel soar. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. I want to hear from you. Have you ever seen someone get instant karma at an airport or on a plane? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.